All right, let's do this. Hollow Knight Silksong, man. How does this game even exist? Seriously, outside of the fact that, and I'm not joking when I say this, I still can't process mentally the fact that Silksong is here. Silksong is here, Silksong is playable, and not only is it playable, I've played it with my bare hands. I'm telling you, the words, they just feel so foreign to me. But I digress. Look, all I mean is just in general, how does a game like Silksong even happen? How can a game that has not only been announced 7 years ago, been hyped to the moon and back, collectively blueballed an entire community with a severe lack of information, only to re-announce its game after all that time with a release date 2 weeks after that announcement? And the craziest part, after all that buildup, all that hype, all those insane expectations, and the boys at Team Cherry not only met every expectation I asked for, but god damn it, they exceeded. They exceeded most of it. And even all this time, 2-3 months later, I still can't wrap my head around it. Silksong is a game that was never going to be bad. Let's be clear about that, okay? As a lover of all Metroidvanias and lover of the original Hollow Knight, of which I still stand by is one of the best Metroidvanias you can play even with the release of Silksong, we already knew Hollow Knight Silksong was going to be quality. We knew it. So that's not the impressive part. The impressive part is just how well this game manages to both feel relatively unchanged, but at the same time just different, improved, polished enough to still feel like it earns that sequel status. Is this a drastic sequel? No. But the changes, no matter how small, are so significant that they stack on each other to make a game that feels, in lack of a better sequel term, just better. Just significantly better feeling, playing, looking Hollow Knight. That after 7 years of almost brutal, borderline, cruel silence and anticipation, we can all finally take off our clown outfits and embrace the glorious fact that Silksong is here, and by gum, it is damn near perfect. Hollow Knight Silksong is already a step above the original by actually having a slightly more involved story. I mean, mind you, not too much. I've played many other Metroidvanias significantly more story-focused than Silksong. Not that that's a bad thing, just, you know, Metroidvanias usually have different strengths, and story isn't the leading factor of Silksong, but still, with that said, it is noticeably better. Silksong follows Hornet, now the main protagonist, after she's captured and taken to the distant and mysterious kingdom of Fairloom, a land that appears holy and vibrant but hides a darker truth beneath its surface. Determined to find answers to her capture, Hornet, with the help and companionship of many friends along the way, takes the perilous, dangerous, and epic pilgrimage to the great citadel of Song. And as she gets closer, the real reason why she was brought there, and the role she's being forced to play in Fairloom's fate, become much more clear. One very nice addition here is that Hornet actually speaks. It's nice to have a character that can verbally respond to the many inhabitants of Fairloom. It really adds more to Hornet's personality than the Knight. But while I do like Hornet and was rooting for her and all of her badass moments, she is not the driving factor for me. It's the inhabitants of Fairloom, the inhabitants of this game, that truly makes it feel alive. The side characters have almost passed Hornet in terms of likability and popularity, which says a lot. Bellbeast, Chakra, Sherma, and every resident in Fairloom, whether it's because of their iconic voice lines, their beautiful designs, or just a mixture of both, they just demand my attention every time they're on screen, especially Sherma. God damn it, protect that boy at all costs.
Faridula simanet, doni poina volinet, pina sans mi manisette, d'un enfant sur le banc.
But the feelings that I have for the allies, it's not just restricted for them. Even the obstacles, antagonists, villains are so incredibly fleshed out most of the time that sometimes learning the backstory of not only the adversary that you face, but the world you're exploring really makes it feel like it truly has history. It feels like if you turned off the game and Hornet was not moving, everything in that world would still function as normal. And that's how you know you have a world that feels inhabited with actual history, lore, and deep stories to tell. And that makes it so much more fulfilling when you uncover the secrets deep within Hollow Knight Silksong. A feat that even now I'm still discovering for myself. Now, admittedly, in Hollow Knight Silksong, to understand the story, you do have to pay pretty close attention or you are going to end up a little confused. But if you do, you will be rewarded with a game that is dripping from the brims with genuinely engaging lore and insanely likable, charming, and sometimes even tragic characters. But with all that said, let's be honest, Hollow Knight Silksong is not a story game. I did not come to Silksong particularly for the story, and I am willing to bet the majority of people playing the game aren't either. No, we are here for the Metroidvania-ness of it all. The platforming, the presentation, the combat, and of course, this is where you will find most of Silksong's differences, and most importantly, where your real enjoyment of this game is going to be found. So one big thing about Hollow Knight Silksong needs to be clear. The game is not one of those drastically changed sequels. It's not. In fact, at the very start of the game, maybe like 3 to 4 hours in, I was actually a little bummed out. Not that the stuff wasn't good, but I was just in the headspace that after so many years, so much of a wait, I was really waiting to see if Hollow Knight Silksong was going to really try to add something, anything to justify being called a sequel. But sometimes you also just roll with the good old saying of, if it ain't broke. And that is kind of what it felt like at the beginning of Hollow Knight Silksong. However, Silksong is a game that holds its best cards to its chest, and it really starts to show its hand and really shows its improvement the further you get in the game. And again, even then, I'll say they aren't major, but as you get further and further and compare the small additions added in Silksong to the original, you realize how far all these small changes push Silksong, and how when stacked on top of each other, they make a game that feels much more aggressive, responsive, and most importantly, quicker. That one is probably the biggest difference that you'll notice from the get-go. You can tell that Hornet is not the Knight. The Knight is more like a tiny tank. He hits harder, but he's not the most acrobatic or nimble when compared to Hornet. And that difference may seem small, but in-game, it is really clear. The additions plays a major part in improving arguably the one thing that perhaps wasn't the best part of the original Hollow Knight. It's the platforming. Now, before everyone starts going for the dislike button, let me be clear. I'm not saying Hollow Knight's platforming was bad. Far from it. But like I said, some Metroidvanias have strengths in specific areas. For example, Ori excels at platforming, but has never been the best in terms of combat. While in Hollow Knight, the combat was hands down the best part for me, but it's the platforming that, while I still thought was good, was not what I came to love about Hollow Knight. That is until the sequel came, because Hollow Knight Silksong improves on platforming tenfold. And once again, it's not a drastic change, but it's small changes that just continually stack on top of each other, to the inclusion of a sprint, to the several new ways to parry an enemy's attacks, to the smallest of small add-ins like Hornet actually being able to grab a ledge, to easily what might be the best addition in this game in terms of platforming and combat, the claw line. All of these add-ons just make platforming so much better because they all contribute to the most important thing any game with platforming needs: flow. Just pure, seamless flow where you are locked in at the task at hand, yet the platforming is so smooth and interconnected that it feels like if I master all my parries and time my dash perfectly, I could continually keep myself moving or in the air for extended periods of time. It makes you feel like you are mastering the world, and more importantly, just makes you feel like a badass, just a badass, doing a continuous run without even taking a single hit, especially when you are doing a difficult platforming challenge. It is as satisfying as it sounds, and it's even more satisfying to actually experience it. Now, just because platforming was the aspect, in my opinion, that saw the most improvement, that does not in the slightest mean combat is any less stellar than it was in the first game. Combat in Hollow Knight Silksong was always the main focus of Hollow Knight for me, and Silksong here is no different. And again, in large part thanks to the speed of it all. The combat in Hollow Knight Silksong is even more precise this time. Hornet, while feeling extremely capable, faster, and even more like a skilled hunter, in turn faces enemies that will test her brutally. Silksong is unapologetic with its difficulty, for better and for worse, but at least most of the time, it never usually feels unfair. Most encounters and fights in Silksong really respect you as the player. It's challenging, but usually never not unfair, and most importantly, barring a few key moments, always fun and always euphoric and rewarding when you succeed. And I believe that is just for two big reasons. One, Hollow Knight Silksong, despite being difficult and giving an array of challenging bosses and enemies to face, never once makes you feel weak. Now, I'm not saying you won't get your ass kicked, but my point is, it never makes you feel weak because, like with the platforming, you really feel the subtle difference with Hornet and how she moves. It's what helps to make her feel more capable than the knight ever was. It's the speed, it's the agility that allows you to fly across the screen, reach new heights, and more importantly, deliver insane punishment. And it makes it even better when you're jumping, dashing, sprinting across the arenas, or incorporating the numerous different types of crests that you have in this game that allows Hornet different styles of attacks, from the Hunter's crest with its quick strikes and diagonal parry, to the Reaper's crest and its heavy sweeping slashes. All of these things, from the claw line to Hornet's movements to all the different abilities you get from the crest, all comes together to make combat almost feel like a dance, a mesmerizing give and take that really gets you in a flow state once you really mastered the game's mechanics. Two, but despite all of Hornet's abilities, the game is still tough. It will always be tough. But that's why Silksong gives you an array of tools that gives you further abilities to aid you in combat. Given that you've actually explored the world, it will always give you everything that you need to come out on top. Hollow Knight Silksong never feels like it's shortchanging you. For every challenge you face in Silksong, there is always a way to combat it. And not just with Hornet's useful skills and speed, but with the items at her disposal that allow you to add more hearts, put a protective shield around you during healing, stick to walls, or launch a spinning cogwheel blade of death. And mind you, these are just some of the tools that I found. You mix these two things together and you have combat that, yes, isn't drastically different from the last game, but does manage to build on it in a meaningful way that really shows you that the further you get, that is when you get to the real thrill of Hollow Knight Silksong. And the excitement of combat is not further exemplified more than with Hollow Knight Silksong's boss fights. Unspoken rule of the Metroidvania, practically written in blood, Metroidvanias must have stellar boss fights. It's basically a standard rule of any quality Metroidvania. They have to be big, they have to be epic, they have to be challenging yet fair enough to make it an absolute blast to battle. And let me tell you this, Hollow Knight Silksong nails them 90% of the time. Yes, some stinkers are bound to be present when you have what, like 75 bosses or some in your game, but the majority of the bosses in Silksong are not just some of my favorite bosses of this year. These are some of my favorite bosses in a Metroidvania, period. From the towering battle with the fourth chorus, or the synchronized, almost heartbreaking showdown with the cogwork dancers, to the quick, balanced, back and forth battle with Lace. Each battle was always a feast for the eyes and the ears, while also being a thrill to overcome and learn. But if I had to pick a favorite, then easily, far and away, best boss in the game that I have faced so far, Widow. Unoriginal choice, I'm sure, I don't refute that, but I don't care. This fight is just fucking incredible. It's the first boss that I faced in that game that felt like the true skill test. It felt like if you couldn't beat Widow, then you couldn't make it any further in this game, and that made the boss just so much more fun. But of course, the music is also just fucking fantastic. Speaking of the music of Silksong, it's worth noting that the presentation of this game is phenomenal. I wanted to hold off talking about it because it's one of those things that I have the least to say about, but my god, the presentation is really the extra sprinkles and cherries on the dessert of riches offered in Silksong. Everything that we were just talking about benefits just from how beautiful Silksong is. Silksong takes the art style and detailed backgrounds from the original and just goes nuts. The backgrounds in particular being some of the best backgrounds I think I've ever seen in a Metroidvania. They go a long way to really make a 2D space feel so massive and grand, with lively backgrounds where your lights are flicking, bugs flying in the background, rocks falling, etc. It all comes together to really give Fairloom just an extraordinary atmosphere, and that atmosphere is matched with yet another banger soundtrack by my man, Christopher Larkin. He comes back and once again just knocks it out of the park. Hollow Knight Silksong is packed to the gills with absolute bangers that range from super epic and intense boss themes to subtle themes that are more for giving the area a sense of place, such as Bellheart or Bone Bottom, or my personal favorite song in the game, Coral Chambers. But it's when you enter a gorgeous new location and that small subtle change to a new gorgeous soundtrack occurs, it is just beautiful and really just goes all the way back to what Silksong truly excels at. And it's that wonderful sense of place, that feeling of being so utterly entranced in a world thanks to the look of the world, the sound of the world, and the addicting act of mastering, discovering, and overcoming the world around you. Now, I really only have one personal problem with Silksong. As much as I love this game, I do, it would be a lie to sit here and say the difficulty of this game wasn't a little annoying. Okay, very fucking annoying. I have no issue with a game being challenging or testing you, so long as it does it with one very important rule: fairness. As long as it feels like with every loss I've actively learned a new way to improve or defeat the obstacle in front of me. Now, Silksong actually has many moments of this, but then you have certain moments that are just borderline unfair and infuriating. And some gauntlets in this game that I swear are even harder than the bosses themselves. Looking at you, High Halls, that High Halls gauntlet can legitimately blow me. And these are not great simply for one reason. At the end of any difficult boss or challenge, I feel a sense of relief, accomplishment, and dare I say, a sense of respect. When I feel nothing at the end of beating the boss gauntlet except anger and annoyance and just ready to leave, that is a testament to me that I simply did not enjoy the experience. Now, it wasn't many of them, like I said, but the ones that did severely stuck out like a sore thumb. And clearly I'm not the only one who feels this way, because this is a conversation around Silksong that has been going on ever since the game launched. And honestly, you know what? Fair enough. It's a genuine discussion to have. Some bosses and gauntlets where death at a certain point doesn't become an educational experience anymore. It just becomes frustrating and a hassle. But when I say that, you wanna know what I feel in the grand scheme? I don't feel frustration or disagreement. I truly feel a level of respect for Team Cherry. That word is really what sums up how I feel about Silksong in almost every way. I don't always agree with every decision surrounding the game or its development, but I'll tell you what, in the grand scheme, I respect it. This is a game that is truly uncompromised. You got 3 developers who spent 7 years meticulously and at times brutally creating the exact game that they wanted to make. Just completely marching to the beat of their own drum, whether it would be universally praised or loudly criticized. From going silent for years to re-announcing the game and dropping a release date just 2 weeks later, even down to the pricing. The pricing of this game being a measly $20. That's pennies. They could have charged 30 or 40 bucks easily for this game, and I guarantee the majority of people, including myself, would have happily bought it. But no, Team Cherry decided to do things their way. They didn't buckle under the pressure. They accepted the insane expectations, cooked for as long as they needed to, and shipped the game on their own terms. And whether you agree with it or not, it's just hard not to admire it. They made the game that they wanted. Then that game is a tough as nails, yet gorgeous, satisfying, and thoroughly enjoyable Metroidvania that simply doubles down on nearly every strength the original Hollow Knight laid down. One final time for the books, Hollow Knight Silksong is finally here. And to the shock of just about everyone, it doesn't just live up to the insane hype, it surpasses it. This is a game, whether you agree with everything in it or not, is a game that radiates passion through every boss fight, every platforming challenge, and every gorgeously detailed corner of Fairloom. You can feel the joy the developers had making Silksong, fully aware that it wouldn't be for everyone. Is this a game that may be a little too challenging at times? Yes, there's a fair argument to be had there. Did some of Team Cherry's decisions, like years of silence or announcing the release date so close, causing problems for other talented indie devs? Again, yeah, you could argue that. But at the end of the day, when you look at the full package on display, between a detailed and gorgeous art design, a stellar soundtrack, a world that is packed to the gills with secrets and lore to discover, an engaging narrative with a cast of likable characters, and of course, intense but thoroughly engaging and rewarding platforming and combat, it's just hard to see Silksong as anything less than a frickin' masterpiece. Team Cherry is officially 2 for 2, and while I am hoping and praying that the wait for the next IP, or hell, even Hollow Knight 3, won't take another 7 years, if it does, at least I can say if Silksong is any proof of this, then the wait will absolutely be worth it. And that was my review of Hollow Knight Silksong. I'm glad I made a review on this game. There was just so much to say, so much I adored about Silksong, I just had to get it all out there. my next video, it is the big one. It is my top 10 games of 2025. So expect that in the coming weeks. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. It helps a ton. If you want to stay up to date with what I'm doing, you can follow me on Instagram. That's @thegamercritic. Be good people, and I will talk to all of you very soon. All right, peace.